Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome. Normally, I would be doing a super awesome intro sound at this point, but I'm not doing that now. Mostly because I set up everything for our interview screen, and then I realized afterwards that I didn't have a way to do the video at the same time that I was doing that. So I apologize for that. It's fine because we are here for a really awesome conversation that I'm excited to have. And I hope you folks are ready for it, as we are lucky enough to have one of the principals from NeoCab here. I can beatbox it, yeah. I'm sure I can, Dragon. Dun 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 dun. Anyway, you get the idea. But I know many of you watched with interest as my vocal team, the Arvocalists, handled NeoCab over the last few months, and we were really struck by this. We were really struck by this game. We really admired a lot of what it was doing. I was just very, very impressed with it all the way along. And we just came to the conclusion after we finished it. It wasn't one of those games that, yeah, thanks, Illness. It wasn't one of those games that we were like, it was fun and enjoyable, but it wasn't a game that you're just like, what a joy. It was a game that really made you think. And that really struck me. And so I got lucky enough that when I was doing an impromptu stream, actually, a couple of weeks ago after dropping Little Larv off at camp, that we had Andrew McClain actually came in. One of the people I will introduce is the lead engineer on NeoCab, and just said, I watched your videos and I wanted to say you folks did a great job and I really appreciate it and all that. And this was just awesome to me because I was like, hey, listen, since you're here, is it possible that we can get you on for a conversation? And so I'm very happy to be able to present that conversation tonight. So before I go any further, I will just say a couple of quick things. If you haven't already done so, please follow our channel. Please check out our YouTube with !ArvTube, our Discord with !ArvCord, our Twitter with !ArvTweets, website arvaneleron.com, Patreon is !ArvTreon, shop is !ArvShop, and the subscription system, you can sub to the channel, of course. !Icarus for my Icarus graphic novel from Athos Arts. !Greyshade KS for details about my Greyshade Kickstarter launching on August 31st, which has more books coming from Athos Arts and other things like that. And Library, which is my Tales and Tomes from the Forbidden Library, 5e Adventure, and Sourcebook. Very excited about both of those, about all of those, and so you should check those out. BLM, Black Lives Matter, very important to affirm and assert the significance and importance of Black lives, and Help Now, which is the World Health Organization page on suicide prevention. So I am very fortunate that I have not only Andrew here, but I have also got Russ Guberman and Zach Clay. And so I'm going to unmute myself so they know that we're ready to go, and then I'm going to unmute them. And lastly, we're going to see if my clever ruse of setting this up worked. Hey, there we go. And we do have our interview set and ready to go. I realize the only thing I'm leaving out here is Twitch chat. We need to have Twitch chat. I mean, look, what good does any of this do if we don't have Twitch chat?
It's an essential ingredient.
Right, I think so.
To every stream.
So, although I realize that I probably should put, let's see, are you that one? No, you're that one. Okay, there's that one. I'm going to put that one down so we can actually see. There we go. There's the chat that we're talking about. There it is. And I'll put that up there in my corner so it doesn't interfere with the people that we have here, and I'll make adjustments as we go through. So two of these people should be familiar to you folks immediately, and that of course is right below me. We have one Mr. Zach Clay, and right next to Zach we have one Mr. Russell A. Guberman, two of the amazing Arvocalists who did all of the amazing voices. Little Red Dot sadly cannot join us today, although she did the voice of Lena very, very well throughout the course of it, and she wishes she could be here, but she cannot. And also Darkside Rob is on vacation, so I don't feel bad for him because he's hanging out at the beach, the Cape, or something like that. So that's the deal with that. But the person who you may not know, who's the person sitting right over there to the left of this Brady Bunch screen, is Andrew McClain, who is the lead engineer. Please tell me if I got that right. I think it's lead engineer for NeoCab, which we just played. So first of all, Andrew, welcome. Thank you for coming in and saying hi to us, and then going further to sort of set up this interview with us, because we're really happy to have you. And I guess I just want to start by asking very quickly, How you got into game work and game design for this. You could also tell people a little bit about your general background in the process of doing that. And then
Sure.
B, if you could talk a little bit about your work on NeoCab specifically, just to start us
Great,
out.
great. Yeah, sure. So I've kind of like straddled the like nexus of tech and media for the last 20 or so years. I did my undergraduate in computer science, and then I went to grad school for acting. I was an actor, well, am an actor in LA pre-pandemic for a long time. On the side, did startup like web, like in the early like Web 2.0 days. Ended up working for Twitter, and then after Twitter, went back to acting in LA. And it was one of my coworkers from Twitter who went on into games. He worked on Firewatch, um, and then started up his own game, which was NeoCab, and he was looking for people to come on part-time to help out. And so I was like, oh, this is great. I've always loved gaming. I've always wanted, I really believed in the project and what was being spoken, and joined on. Initially it was going to be like a 3-month part-time gig, which ended up being a 2-year full-time gig, where I started off as me just kind of working on the user interface, and then gradually kind of growing into basically everything that wasn't 3D in the game, like the landscape generation and things like that. And then in the process, I would pitch punch-ups on some of the stories to the lead writer, and then I ended up getting to write one of the characters too, which was my first paid writing gig, which I was like one of the things I'm most proud of in like the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So that was basically my trajectory.
So you actually took all of these, different things that you had started out with, from computer science to acting to even Twitter, I would argue, and put all this stuff together really in this thing that just sort of came together. So when you say it started as a 3-month part-time and then ended up as a 2-year, were you aware as the transition was happening that was happening, or did you like turn around one day and you're like, Jesus, like how long have I been doing this? Type of thing.
Well, I think my wife would say like, hey, I thought that this was supposed to be just like 4 hours a day when I was working on it. But yeah, like I think like about 8 months in, it became really apparent that it was like this is like very satisfying work, and the team was absolutely phenomenal. I really loved working with them. And so it just made sense to just keep doing more. It was one of these things where like you see a hole in the wall and you plug it up, and then another hole shows up, and then you plug it up, and then 2 years have passed.
Yep. And then the game gets released. Did you have a sense when you first took on this part-time, what you thought was going to be a part-time gig? Was there something? I know you said that it seemed kind of like a cool thing. Did you have a sense of how deep the game was going to go emotionally? Because I think one of the things, just very quickly, what struck me about it from all of us playing it was that it really did hit you. Like, it's a game you think about after you play it for a while. So I'm wondering if you felt that at all in the process.
That's a great question. Yeah. So yes, I would say yes. Like that was actually one of the reasons I wanted to join the team.
Okay.
Like from the very beginning, it was a very stylized, beautiful world where we wanted to explore this, like the effects of capitalism, the sort of alienation of technology, and like what it means to be like a gig worker,
Yeah.
And so all of those themes, like I think, worked well together. So yeah, that was I would say, like, yes, I knew that from the start. That was one of the main reasons I wanted to work on the project, and I think that's why we were able to draw such an amazing team of people together to work on it.
And it was a big team. It was a huge team too. I mean, relatively speaking, right?
Yeah, there were like 14 writers. So yeah, like each character was basically written by someone, like by a different person. And then Paula, and then later she recruited me. Paula, who's the editor and lead writer, had the monstrous task of, one, coordinating this whole narrative together and then doing rewrites to make sure that the voice sounded similar, and moving forward from there. So yeah, it was a really big team. It was like a really big team of a lot of siloed people, because it was, people were all over the world writing on it.
Right. So it really was an ensemble performance, like literally.
The core team of us was about 5. So there were about 5 of us that were like every day sitting down trying to put out fires and figure out how to ship a game.
Figure out how to do it. One other question that I want to ask, and then I'm going to open it up and let Zach and Russ jump in, and et cetera. We can make it more freewheeling. But one of the things that fascinates me, and is something that I've become increasingly interested in over the years, and it's one of the sort of reasons for the existence of this channel, is narrative in general. And I've always been interested in games as a narrative medium. What games can do in telling stories that perhaps other forms of media cannot. And I'm wondering if you can weigh in a little bit on that, about something like NeoCab, because NeoCab is a visual novel technically, right? But there's we kept referring to that last situation. And by the way, chat, there will be a few spoilers for NeoCab. My apologies, but go watch our VOD now, and it'll be fine. But that last thing, we really referred to it as a boss fight. It was game-like, and there was a lot of gamification of this that wasn't just I say something, you say something, right? So I'm wondering a little bit about what, in your view, a game like NeoCab can say narratively that a story like NeoCab, or a novel like NeoCab, or a movie like NeoCab might or might not have been able to say.
That's was going to be my exact question as well.
Okay.
It's such a good question too, right? Because I think there's an inherent tension between the amount of agency that a player has and the narrative, in a way. Because if you have something that's completely open world, you have something that is like completely emergent, you don't necessarily have a chance to craft a coherent narrative, right? You don't you can, and I think that there's oftentimes there's a desire for that, because it's like, oh, things just sort of happen organically, and I think there's room for narratives like that. Like you see that where people that are playing like Dwarf Fortress create an entire like found narrative, right? Just based on sort of nothing. I think this is a little bit more interesting because it's like part of what the story is trying to explore is, what does choice mean? Like, what does it mean to need to sacrifice, you need to sort of sacrifice your emotional health in order to make a buck, or make your passenger happy, because that has absolute ramifications on you.
Yep.
I think the interesting thing, and something that Patrick, our creative director, has talked about, is that life, we talk about the game has, there's gamification in the boss battle, but it's almost like life in general has become gamified, right? Where your rating of your Uber driver is affecting their ability to survive, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Or the restaurant itself, right? So I think it kind of folds in on itself, right? Where this medium, and I think even in the way that we accomplished it, there were some things that maybe we didn't do quite as well as we could have. There wasn't a lot of game to the game, right? There was some. It was much more of this is a novel that you have some choice in. But yeah, I think that part of what I really love about the game is that the idea that it's trying to explore is also present in the medium itself, of you being able to choose or not choose, or what makes a lot of good games is trying to make hard choices. Do you do this or do you do this? It's not necessarily apparent, right? And from the very beginning, when we were designing our idea of how do we represent emotion in the game, with the sort of feel grid? How do we make it accessible but also nuanced, so it's not just are you a paragon or renegade, right? It's not just a sort of linear oh, and this is the right choice and this is the wrong choice. All of these questions we talked a lot about, right? And it even played into that sort of boss battle where where early on we wanted to make it so that there weren't like you couldn't necessarily win it just by doing one set of responses, right? Like we consciously wanted to say like being angry is valid and a valid emotion, and you shouldn't necessarily be penalized for that, because I think in a lot of narrative games, if you really want to express something, if you want your character to express it, a lot of times what happens is the players end up wanting to like choose the right response, right? Or the response that will like the response that will make the NPC happy, right? And we even saw that in the game where, you know, even some reviewers would play the game and not kind of get clued into, oh, this is a very manipulative person, and the object of this boss battle is for you to stand up for yourself in an authentic way, and they were just trying to sort of please the NPC, which makes you lose the game, right? Because that's also what happens in life if you're dealing with someone who's exceptionally manipulative.
It's also, by the way, the connection, it seems to me, between what I liked is the connection between the emotion and the answer being given sort of tracked more closely than some of these games that don't do that well. I really, really like the Mass Effect series, but man, there are times when the emotional reaction that supposedly you present is not at all what you actually say. And you're just like, what is this? Like, I would never have said what XYZ. And so that was not the case here. In fact, if anything, there were times that I found myself annoyed by, but in a good way, banging up against an answer that I really wanted to give, but I'm not angry enough to give that answer, or I'm not happy enough or sad enough. And it was interesting that in that last boss battle, I liked the idea that we had enough flexibility that there were moments that I was in an emotional range where I could give the answer I really wanted to do, which is basically, you know, get the hell out of here, you know, like, and do other terrible things to yourself, which was my deep emotional feeling towards this person who reminded me a lot of people in my past that I just did not, you know. So that was, I really liked the idea that you closely tied in what the emotion actually was to the actual answer, as opposed to here's an emotion and now have something which is really not representative of that emotion.
Right. That's, I think that's such a good insight. Very early on, we decided that we didn't want to have any of those sort of like that whatever you said that whatever the text was that was presented to you as a choice was going to be essentially the text that you said. So that way you didn't have this kind of gotcha moment where you're like, you know, you say like the first part of something, and then you end up going on like this complete tangent.
I didn't
really want. But I think you also like, I think one of the things that we, you know, one of the hard things of the game, and I think if we were going to make it again from scratch, I think one of the tricky things was also like this notion that you were blocked, right, by like that you the player were separate from the character. And that you weren't able to make some choices. I think that if we were to do it again, I think that we might choose a different like interface for showing you like this is what you could have said, rather than you trying to make the choice and then us saying, no, sorry, you're not quite in that state.
Almost like graying it out or something.
Yeah. I think
Possibly.
you see that in some you see that in some RPGs where it's
like you don't have the charisma to make that answer.
Exactly.
So Zach, Russ, jump in here. What would either of you?
So I've got a bunch. But I know we're both chomping at the bit. Zach.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sure, I'll go ahead. Because mine has to do right with what we were just talking about, which is what I sort of got from what you were just explaining about the arrangement of the boss fight. Was it sounded more like you wanted the player to just have the experience of going through the boss fight, rather than some of those reviewers that you had that felt like they had to beat the boss fight. And I think that was maybe some of where the gamification of some players came through, where they're like, what's the goal of this? But really something that I really appreciated about that is it's less about the end result of, you know, getting a star or a trophy at the end of NeoCab saying, I won NeoCab, and more about saying I experienced it, you know, and kind of making the choice. So I think that's kind of an interesting and new avenue with gaming, in the sense that it's less about you winning something and having just the pure dopamine of playing a game, and more about actually changing someone's perspective based on the game that they're playing. That wasn't really a question, but I don't know. That's just a reflection on what you're saying. I don't know. I just thought that was really cool. I like the way that you guys designed that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like that was a tension in the game about like how gamey to make it. And how balanced to make it. I mean, the boss battle was really interesting. I'm also like stoked that you guys were able to see like, oh, this is a boss battle, because like the file is named boss battle, right? Like that's that was like exactly what we were trying to model. But one of the interesting things in the development of it was that so we wrote, like, the entire game is written in this language called Ink, which is like a branching narrative language. And so you could actually play the entire thing just sort of in basically like a browser where you're manually making choices completely outside of the game itself.
Yeah.
And what that let us do was create like a automatic bot that would test every single option to see if like how the game ended automatically. But it was sort of an ironic thing, because we ended up leaning a little bit too much into that, which is ironic given the fact that the game is sort of about losing your humanity in technology. But like about a week before we were slated to ship, maybe a little bit earlier, I started playing through the boss battle and realized you couldn't win it, because the only way that you could win it was if you chose literally random responses that didn't make any emotional sense, because the way that it was set up, you would flunk out. Like you would, we knew in the boss battle we wanted to make it so that if you were pushed to this emotional state, you would lose, right? And your goal was to push your opponent into an emotional state. And so we had to rewrite the whole thing like 2 weeks before in order to make it work, because we had sort of relied on this robot to tell us, oh, well, 67% of the time you win, which seems about right. So
it's a good thing somebody did that, and there wasn't just sort of like, they produced a game that can't be won. And
right. Yeah. So we wanted to design that ending moment to be like have resonance, that does have this sort of like internal feeling to it, where you hopefully by this point you're kind of identifying with like the emotional state of the protagonist, and you can kind of navigate that. So, you can role play it well, and that allows you to sort of get the ending that you might want. Although I think it's really interesting when you like, if you get really, really angry at Savvy, there's two ways to win the thing for spoilers. Like, one is to like be very honest with her and to kind of keep centered and to push her out. There's also an alternate way, if you are able to like really, really get under her skin and make her really angry, without getting so angry yourself, then you can also win. But it's a sort of tricky balance.
Yeah. We were trying to get under skin quite a bit. I wanted to just quickly, for chat, we are going to take questions later on from chat, and I'll explain the procedure when we get there. In the meantime, you can certainly feel free to like banter and talk and ask questions, things like that. But be aware, if you want to ask them, definitely later on, I will solicit those specifically. But I did want to say that Configuration Queen says, I talked about the game, the final session with the boss battle, on a date the week after, because it had been so cool, and our chat discussion between our chatty selves and the Arvocalists was cool. Fun. So that's interesting, that this stuff actually came up in real life, emotional interaction situations. So to speak.
Hey, can I jump in and ask a quick question? First of all, Andrew, thank you for your part in creating this game. It was the most memorable playthrough that we've had in memory. We really enjoyed it. Specifically for me, like, I loved the world. I'm a big fan of dark cyberpunky type stuff. So my question was, when you joined the team, was there like an indoctrination where they're like, here's some William Gibson and Philip K. Dick and Neil Stephenson, just like, go read this and then come back?
Yeah, that's a great. No, I think that I think it was more like the people that wanted to work with it had already have all of Gibson's work, and we're all quoting it to each other already. So yeah, we all like, all of us, like the sort of cyberpunk theme of it, was like really attractive to all of us. And like this sort of like near like near future. It gives you such a good option, like opportunity to write satire about what's going on in the world right now.
Okay, so following up on that, so you mentioned that you were previously at Twitter, and presumably at least a couple other people at the company were. Like you said, the game takes place in a very, very realistic near future, and there are concepts like the stealing of people's emotional data for use in manipulating them that is very similar to things that are going on now. Like, how much of this were you drawing on previous work experience, and and how much of that affected the narrative in the game?
That's a great question. So for me specifically, I wrote the Anthony character, which is sort of a tech bro, like a douchebag with a heart of gold. And so it was heavily influenced of my time in Silicon Valley, because they're just like, it was like just there's the lack of self-awareness in some of the companies, and also just like the absolute excess of wealth is I think a really interesting thing. For me, I wanted, like, for that character specifically, I really also then wanted to take him start from there and then see like, well, what's underneath, like what, and he has a sort of 3-write arc that can either end very, very poorly for Lena, or like unlock a special token where you get to stay in a really nice hotel for the night.
Man, we should have got that.
Yeah,
we didn't do it.
Nope.
But yeah, I think that I think a lot of it, like many of us, the team was fairly diverse, right? There's people from a lot of, both racially and geographically diverse. So we had a lot of inputs from there, but we all had like a very, very similar, fairly liberal, criticism of capitalism and the gig economy. And I think that informed everything.
I want to add, let me just do one quick follow up on that about the about this aspect of technology, because one thing that struck me about that was that there is this very interesting idea. I mean, I'm playing this right on a Nintendo Switch, and I'm playing it with Russ and Zach are both in California. Dot is in Georgia. Rob is in New York City. I am in Southern Connecticut, and we're doing this through OBS. We're streaming it to an international audience, which is seeing this on Twitch. Like, all of these are technologically possible, right? And there's always a tension, it seems to me, in cyberpunk between the manifest coolness of a lot of the technology, like how neat it is, and that including in your game, the feel grid, right, is a really neat thing, but also has serious issues composed with, like, if even your emotions are not safe and safely private, what does that suggest? And I guess I'm wondering a little bit about, did any of you feel the need to either check each other or sort of check in, or did the director need to tell you about this, or what, or did you as a engineer is working on UI and stuff like that every so often have to be like, hey, this kind of thing is coming through in this way, where people were pushing too much over the line towards being too in love with the technology, or concomitant, or in the reverse of that, rejecting all of it in a way which would have seemed vaguely hypocritical insofar as we're only able to experience it because of the coolness of the technology, which makes it possible for us to experience it. So I'm wondering about, did you ever have to navigate that tension from your point of view?
That's a great question. I think, well, it's hard because we even though there were a lot of people, we were so strapped for time and capital that, like, everything was an emergency, so we didn't really have the opportunity to, like, really be thoughtful about it. Was more like, well, can we make this sort of work, like, visually? I think that there already, like, I think part of it was that there was already a very strong visual visual syntax for the game. Vincent, our art director, was extraordinarily talented, and when you have a small core, it's pretty easy to, like, rein that in. In terms of the story writing, yes, there was a little bit like we had to balance a little bit of like, I would say less about the coolness of the technology. Sometimes we had to balance a little bit of the absurdity because playing in the near future, you know, the sky is the limit. So we want everything to feel anchored, even though, you know, even when we have these fun moments like the pain worm or Klaus and Merrick, you know, all of these like really
don't get me started on Aganon,
funny,
man. Whoever made Aganon, I'm telling you right now, so that guy.
That's Robin Sloan. So Robin Sloan wrote Aganon, and he's an incredible novelist. And he also worked at Twitter, and is one of my favorite people. Really, really funny guy. You know what? I would also say that like that was the other thing that really, really impressed me, at least, is that like I loved how funny the game could be. That there were some like really great moments there. I think that we played along, like it was interesting. We had to do a lot of work to go over, like, so early on, like, and I think you mentioned this in the last episode about how it's still tricky. Like, we had these 2D characters and we puppeted them, so like every emotion and like every reaction is intentionally placed in the game. At one point we thought we wanted to, there was a suggestion to sort of randomly do cuts, camera cuts based on like the amount of time that had passed. But we kind of threw that out because we wanted to be more like as you know from filmmaking, like the camera that you're using is part of the story, right?
Yeah.
The way in which the characters are reacting are part of it. So this again goes away from this sort of like emergent, like randomness where you read meaning into it and into a more sort of controlled, a more controlled sort of treatment of each ride.
Right.
But what ended up happening is that took a ton of time because we had to go through, once we had locked all the scripts, then go through and mostly it was like me and Paula and Patrick, the creative director, would go through and then, you know, write every reaction and make sure that you're not reacting too much, make sure that Lena is reacting in an interesting way, make sure that, you know, the technology exists so that when she's turning this 3D car, it's not like her arm isn't going up like this while her head is moving, right?
I mean, that's how I drive. But...
Yeah, I mean, that's how I do it too. Yeah. So, so we were like there wasn't a lot of opportunity to be super carried away with the technology of it because every piece of technology that exists in the world we had to build from scratch, and there just wasn't enough time and energy to sort of do that. I mean, there more so we had to rein back on like what would happen in the rides, right? Because you would have like you'd have to have these, the writer would come, like one of the writers would come up with a beat where they would pull something up out of their lap, but we just didn't have the assets or the art or the time to create that, so we had to sort of cut around it or fake it.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I have a question about the choice to have the main character be a named set in stone character like Lena versus a lot of games that let you make your own character. Like, why did, and I mean, I actually kind of prefer that it was Lena, but I'm just asking because I think it's curious. Some games make the decision of, you know, here's the character creator, you're playing NeoCab, blah, blah, blah. So what was like the impetus behind the decision of making it a story about a specific person rather than, because some might argue that if we'd gotten to make our own character, perhaps the experience would have been even more personable, right?
Sure.
I'm not sure if that's true.
Sure.
But anyway, what thoughts you have on that?
That's a great question. So there's a few layers of that. Like the most boring layer is that we chose to do that because we didn't have the ability to have you create your own character. Like we couldn't build that out. But a better answer for that is one, we specifically wanted the story to be about a person of color and like exploring like what that alienation felt like, because we had a lot of people of color on staff. Two, you touch on a really contentious point that we had early on in the game process, where originally I think that we were thinking of it just as a first person game. you weren't ever going to see Lena's face. But we had a lot of systems in place that we wanted to be able to like show the passengers. We had this sort of graphic novel like visual language that we sort of landed on. And then more and more we sort of migrated towards, you can see Lena, you can see how she's reacting, because that's a big part of cluing the player into what her emotional state is, and what the like how you're like navigating these rides and winning the rides. And then once we made that decision, it then became very clear that we actually did want to explore, like, there is a definite difference between the character that you're playing and the player, right? Like, and as evidenced by, like, there are certain things that you can't say because the character that you are playing isn't feeling that. And I think that what we tried to go for is like that feeling of, like, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, like this disconnect between the player and the player's character, right? Where your character knows things, or you know things that your character doesn't necessarily know, or there's, they're not necessarily aligned. And that's a total valid criticism, that maybe it's not as immersive as it could have been, but I think it allowed us to tell a different kind of story where we aren't necessarily centering the story on, like a white guy.
Which is enormously valuable, by the way. Like I did want to say, that it is an excellent question from Zach, because the immersiveness of to me, there's two different versions of immersiveness, and I think one is the one that dominates in the industry, which is this idea that we want you to feel as if you are in the middle of the world. But the other method of immersiveness, which frankly humanity has been engaged in for storytelling for thousands of years, is where you become, because we are all human, so closely interconnected with the character that's telling the story, even if that person is a wildly different character from you, ethnically, religiously, spiritually, however, right? It makes no difference if you make the character interesting enough to connect with, and to be able to find yourself following along with that character story. And there may even be value to that for the reasons you just said, because it means that you don't get a white guy thinking, well, I don't know, I get to see myself in a game. Like, I don't know, go see 90% of all games and you'll get to see that, right? Like, and I was thinking about even The Witcher, although that is a white guy, but The Witcher, nobody sits there and goes like, I don't feel like The Witcher 3 is immersive enough because I have to be Geralt. In fact, they find it's more centering because, like, Geralt's story is its own thing and allows you to kind of play to that narrative. So anyway, it just struck me that there's another kind of immersion that isn't just faceless. As Configuration Queen says in chat, it's much easier to think that Lena's just a robot if we can't see her and her reactions, and if she's just this like literal puppet almost that you're kind of making.
And I think it's a different I think it meets you in a different place, where instead of you as in the game, like experience the game as yourself, you are role playing the game as Lena, right? And I think the interesting thing to me is that, like, some people don't do that. Some people don't want to do that. They aren't interested in that. They get frustrated by it. Some reviewers were frustrated by that, right? There were that's always it's always really interesting to me to release this game and see how it resonates. And like for some people, it resonates exceptionally deeply, which is so like satisfying to see. It was a very personal work for the whole team. And some people they aren't interested, there isn't fun for them, or they're just not, they don't want to role play as like this person, or they're not interested in doing it. Yeah,
that's true. Russ, you had a bunch that you wanted to throw out there. You got any answers?
This is not related to what we were just talking about, but I'm wondering where the staff comes down on crypto, because like it's in the game.
Here we go. And Russ is our resident crypto guy, just so you know.
Well, it's in the game, but it has kind of a nefarious purpose because it all serves like the Capra Corporation. I'm wondering whether you think that that's, a risk of current cryptocurrencies, or whether that's just sort of the direction that even fiat currency is going, is that it feeds a particular beast depending on which one you choose to serve, kind of thing.
That's a great question. I so my personal thing, because so there's a moment in one of the Anthony rides where he asks Lena if he can explain to her what cryptocurrency is, and she's like,
she tunes out.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember
that.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah,
because it's just like he's just like, she's like, it's just so, I don't know. It's just so much. The lore of the game, like, yes, there is, like, I would say, like, we don't go deep enough into like the actual ramifications of like crypto in general to like give that question its due. You're not going to be satisfied with the response because it was more, that's like a more of like, the feeling was right.
Yeah.
We have a little bit of lore in the game where like the dollar got devalued. We wanted to have a separate, currency that was game currency. It made sense. And so like I'm not a crypto guy.
Well, clear, because you wrote the character for who bores everyone to death talking about crypto. So.
Right. But I think that because I think that like the trope of the guy who is super into crypto and just wants to tell you about it, I find that very funny. Yeah. And I find that like also very relatable because he's like, I was like, what could he mansplain? Like, what would be like the perfect thing for him to just go deep on, right? Because that's all he does. He's so like, the character is like so just like right here, right? Because he's so empty inside. Mm-hmm. So that was my shortcut. Maybe it was a little bit lazy writing. But,
nice, thanks.
Oh man, no, you can go ahead, Russ. You had a follow up.
Yeah, I'm good for now.
No, yeah, I just like that whole thing. I think we were even for a bit like trying to look up the etymology of like Capra and like where you guys were going with that as a replacement for whatever it is, Uber or whomever the the big bad entity was, and why you chose that particular name.
I don't know. That was sort of, I think, organically decided early on. We wanted a placeholder for Amazon, Apple, Uber. It just was an easy thing. I think that the interesting thing is that like the development of the narrative actually, like, originally I think the game was more gaming. It was more about like you surviving 7 nights of like racing other other neocab drivers. Oh. And then Paula, I believe it was Paula, but I could be wrong. But Paula started wanting to anchor it in this emotionality. And like I remember the first time she pitched Savvy and this relationship that Lena had with Savvy. And for me, that was the moment where I was like, actually, to go back, that was the moment where I was like, you know what? I don't want to be part-time on this anymore. Because she described this sort of like manic pixie dream girl with this complicated relationship. And it was so fleshed out about like this feeling of that friendship that you want more of, that you aren't able to, and the other person knows that and uses it to manipulate you. And that felt so real and personal to me. I just like, I absolutely fell in love with that. And then the overall arc then became more about your friendship with Savvy and you navigating that within this world. So that it wasn't just a disjoint bunch of rides, because originally we were thinking, oh wait, we're going to do 50 different characters. It's going to be more like Taxi Cab Confessionals, and it's just going to be a huge cast. But then very quickly we realized, one, that's a very, very expensive game to make, because you have to make assets for all of those characters, but also it doesn't allow you to really tell the stories of these people. So we ended up having we limited the cast, and then gave each of them more than one ride, so that way you can explore like how are they navigating this world as well.
More quality over quantity type thing.
We got a chance to see that develop over time, which is really cool. All right, well let's hit it on the head, because the thing that really I think separates the game out is not only its focus on emotional conditions, but also its focus on abuse. Really, a kind of abuse, and in particular, I mean, not this sort of obvious tropey and overused abuse, especially when it's gendered and like all sorts of reasons that that's problematic. Right. But this is a situation where immediately those of us, and many of us in the stream had encountered this. Anyone who had encountered someone who was a borderline personality or had had a relationship with one knew exactly what was going on and felt chilled and like just was like, and I'm gonna call Zach out on this for just a moment, only because it was helpful, not call him out, but just sort of like highlight him, because Zach had not had that experience, and so Zach was kind of like watching us, like who had been through it, sort of have this visceral dislike of Savvy, which was, and I kind of got that vibe a little bit early on, where I already was not a fan, and then the more that this was going on, and then some of the gaslighting and the pardon the language, the bullshit and the all of this stuff, which was not only abusive in that it rewrote history, but was abusive in that the person knew damn well that's what they were doing. Even the fake crying, which everyone in chat will tell you, like when that happened, I didn't even give. Normally, I would ask, I'd be like, "Hey, what do you folks think about this?" That one, I'm like, stop with the fake crying bullshit, because I knew immediately, because I read it do exactly this. Like, I mean, to a T, because and my wife is a therapist and deals with borderlines, and this is what happens. So what I want to ask is, it's extremely difficult, though possible, but it's very difficult to treat borderlines. Yeah. It's very difficult to be in a relationship, obviously, with a borderline. And so what I'm wondering about is, I've got to imagine that it's also difficult to write a game about a borderline, or at least one where a borderline is prominently displayed, without coming across as either just repeatedly beating the hell out of the borderline, metaphorically speaking, or to make it into some kind of broad-based, like, well, everybody hurts. Because from the perspective of Lena, she's spent her whole life thinking about everybody hurts. And this is a situation, the whole game doing that. And this is a situation where she could be like, no, I'm hurting. F you. You did this. You know what I mean? And so, as you said, the anger has a kind of righteous feel to it. But I'm wondering how you all, especially as a large writing group, I know there was one or two people responsible for writing each one, but how you navigated that very difficult process of representing what is mental illness and yet also what is abuse in a kind of nuanced way. I think you did so brilliantly, but I'm just curious about what the team had to do, because that was taking a lot on, it seems to me, to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that a lot of that credit goes to Paula, who was the lead, the lead story, the lead writer and the story editor. She basically shepherded that. She shepherded Savvy's character from the moment that she pitched, like, what if the game were about this? Like, what, it's this relationship, like this, there's this relationship. This is also one of those things, though, I feel like we all, like, everyone on the team, and the credit goes to Patrick for assembling this team and leading it. Everyone didn't want to do the cheap answer. Sure. Right. And so, because of that, I think we all want, like, this is one of those situations where it started off where, like, okay, we have a couple roommates and this will be maybe our byline, and maybe there's a mystery that goes along with it. Maybe she goes missing or maybe not. Let's try to explore that. But then as the game was fleshed out, like, that dynamic kind of organically grew. So I don't think it was necessarily a, like, let's tackle borderlines. Well, right. It was more like, it was more like, we know that Lena is, like, we needed Lena to be a very empathetic character, and Paula was always like a huge proponent for Lena, and was draconian in her edits of Lena's voice, because one of the really tricky things of having a writing staff is that all of us wrote Lena, because we all, even though we're writing the ride with Anthony or Gideon or Aganon, we're all writing Lena's responses. And so Paula's job became, I need to anchor all of these Lena responses. And there was a lot of back and forth in the writer's room about like, well, what is the authentic Lena voice, right? Where is she coming from, right? And knowing that she's this people pleaser, which plays a double purpose. One is it anchors her as a character, but also anchors you in the mechanics of the game, because you need to please your passengers in order to beat the game, right? So this kind of goes back to this layering of the thing that we want to express is also manifested in the mechanics of the game as well. So Kim Belair Kim Belair, who's an incredible writer out of Montreal, she worked on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I think, and a lot of really amazing properties. She wrote the boss battle, and just like nailed it. She had this whole idea of like this structure of Savvy's going to bring back all of these memories, and each one of them is categorized by like different qualities that she's trying to pick at Lena, and then you're able to then respond to that in a try to respond in a genuine way. And then Paula and I had the tricky thing of then making that work, given the vast different, like all the different rides that you could have taken in the game, and communicate the sort of gaminess of the boss battle in a way that you could pick up as a player, so it wasn't completely obtuse, right? So that's a little bit of an answer to the question. I don't know if that...
No, that's a good answer. And I will say, too, the boss battle, I also give you credit, and the team credit, because the boss battle is also gutsy, because there is an element of it where I found myself, I think we all kind of were like, oh man, like we're going through the same ground. And it literally occurred to me as I was having that feeling, but this is exactly what it's like. Like right. It's the repetitiveness, and that's part of this gaslighting, right? It's the repetitiveness. It's the, like, well, I've already said, and you're like, we've gone through this. Like, we've already established this ground. Most people, you have a conversation with them, and, you agree, X is true, and we're like, okay, yeah, X is true. And then you don't have to constantly go back over and say, but wait, X is true. But that's not the case with these situations and with this particular kind of people that we're talking about. So it's gutsy because I think it's true. I think it's real. I think it helps the sort of genuineness of the experience. But it's gutsy because it definitely could run the risk, and it sounds like it did for a couple reviewers, maybe even before that, of sort of being off-putting to them. But I don't know. But I give the team credit for not bailing out at that last stage and just sort of, in the sake of making it. I know you wanted to make it gamey enough, but not so gamey that we kind of lost what made the experience of NeoCab enjoyable all the way along.
Right, and absolutely. That was always our goal, was to start from a place of truth, and then layer on top of that the game of it. Yeah. Because I think that I don't think it's that different though from writing stand-up or writing a screenplay, where you have to be, you have this idea of what you were trying to say, and then you need to edit and adjust it so that it lands and it hits and it punches, or that it's like easy to understand from a game perspective, right? Because it's easy, like we ran into a lot of problems earlier on in the process, where we would, you have these emotional shifts that happen in the game, right? A passenger says something, it affects Lena's emotional state. But then to what end, right? And we would have some rides where we would have a bunch of emotional changes, but then it would just get really, really muddy, because it's like, well, what is actually happening to Lena here? Like and especially if you're doing like a branching narrative, like it's sort of like you're mixing all these different colors and then just turns brown. Right? Like it just gets muddy. Right. You're not really saying anything about like your emotional state. So we had to do a lot of rewrites and a lot of like distillation of like, what is it that we're really trying to say in every moment. So I think there was also a bug on the Switch too, specifically for that platform, where some of the things would kept repeating also. So,
really?
Oh.
No, I
it
don't
wasn't
think that
necessarily
happened here,
like.
but that's what
I want to say, oh, absolutely. It was completely, we were really going for the weariness of arguing. But as you were playing, I was like, oh wait, I don't think that she's not supposed to be repeating those lines.
Okay.
Oh man! All right, I take everything back.
That's funny.
No, I'm just kidding. It's a feature, not a bug. Exactly, CQ. I'll let Rust and Zach weigh in once more. Then, Chad, I will take questions from you. I did want to say, Bulgaris, first of all, thank you to the tier 1 sub to Garlic Tofu from the anonymous user. Thank you, anonymous gifter. And welcome back to the Arvanauts Garlic Tofu. Thank you, anonymous gifter. Bulgaris, just this question about, does the game have a feel-good ending? I'm intrigued to play this game, but don't want any extra emotional stress. I don't think feel-good is how I would define it. The game absolutely, to me, felt like there was hope at the end of it. I felt good about the fact that Lena got to tell Savvy where to go. I mean, like the thing with the text at the end where she sent the text, I'm just like, delete. I was so satisfying, so Perfect, yeah. So I loved that. But I don't know. I mean, we came out of it and we were all like, whew, all right. We really enjoyed it, but I don't know that we were like, yay. I mean, it wasn't like that kind of a game. It was a more like a game that stuck with you. So if you're worried about emotional stress, I'm not sure that I would pick up this game as your first choice, Bulgaris, but I do think it's a game that lets you work through that stuff, and that could be very important. Rusak, please jump in with anything else, and then I want to let Chad ask some questions if you have any.
Yeah. My last question, I guess, would be, I was, as we were in the middle of this interview, surprised and excited to hear that all of the characters were written by different people. I think that's such an awesome idea, and that my impression as we had gone through all of the streams was that it was, 1 or 2 people max writing everything, because that's just generally how I think about games being written. So I'm not sure what commentary you could give about the idea of bringing in people from, it sounds like, around the world. And also what that was like, as far as each writer coming up with their character and like what they wanted to hit on. Like, I know that Gideon wasn't your character, but just the idea of a kid being trapped in a mech suit, which really is kind of ridiculous in our world, but it touched on so many things that make sense in our world as well. And it was just almost like an exaggeration of things that currently exist about, parents being overbearing, to say the least. So anyway, like, anything you have to say about the process of all of the different writers contributing to the game itself, and the decision behind that, and kind of the decisions of what are we going to put in NeoCab? Like, maybe saying what's worth putting in NeoCab isn't the right way to say it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, I think like that winnowing process was really tricky. Yeah. So a lot of that, again, it's too bad that Paula couldn't be here, because that was basically her genius in the game of like wrangling not only like all of these different stories, but also like all these different writers and their egos about like what they want to say and how they want to say it. So I think that, like, one, it was a really supportive writer's room. It was like, and again, like, Patrick did a very, very good job of sort of outlining, like, here's the type of story that we want to say. And then everyone would pitch their ideas about, like, well, here's an idea about like an out of work actor who is trying to trying on a character for Lena.
This was Zach's Oscar moment in our stream, by the way.
Seriously. This was the call up the committee today.
That's one of my favorite rides.
I remember.
I love it. I love that character so much. Some of it was like some of the rides came out of like, well, we need a funny ride. We need to break up the feeling of the game. Some of it was we want to showcase, like, we want a ride where you need to push, like, each ride has like a puzzle to it that if you solve, you get a really good rating. And that was like the sort of gaminess of the rides.
Is there a way to get 5 stars in every ride?
Yes.
Even Aganon?
What?
Even Aganon. Listen,
No
you have no
way.
idea what I did for the Aganon, and I came out, he's like, you suck. I'm like, what the, you're paid worm.
Don't like, no, you can't. So the trick, I mean, I maybe this is a spoiler, but the trick behind Aganon, and Aganon is such a wonderful
No, I was just like, oh my god.
Yeah, both Robin and Duncan, who like Robin wrote Aganon and Una, and Duncan wrote all the sleep stories, and he wrote Gideon, and he wrote a few others that I'm blanking on. They're so funny. For Aganon, you have to never ever smile at him, like, because it's like the whole thing of like pain is horrible. So if you say at the very end of the ride, have a good night, you're gonna get 4 stars, right? If you're like if you're like, life is horrible, he's like, oh yes it is. It's horrible. And the wonderful thing too is like going back, like having gone back on and like done so many rewrites, right? And doing all of these passes to get the car moving correctly, to get the movement working right, to insert all of the camera cuts, right? Because each of the writers just wrote the narrative, and then separately the feel grid changes, the camera cuts, all the puppeting was added after the fact. But then we were able to go through and like start linking things together. So I think there's like in one of Agonon's rides, he references I think an in-world exercise, which then if you've talked to Anthony about his like fro-yoga, they'll mention they'll talk about it with each other. So there's a lot of like really interesting small details like that. But yeah, it was really, really tricky, and Paula did an incredible job of like I said, like bringing down edits that said like, no, Lena doesn't talk like this. Lena like, and there were like, we had a lot of style guides in terms of how we wrote. But all of us were like again, I think it worked because all of us were committed to telling these personal stories.
Was there anything about the character that you wrote that then when you sent it to Paula or the rest of the team, that actually there were changes made that were significant?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I originally was thinking that Anthony could be a romantic interest for Lena. And that was not accepted because they very clearly like I think there's one character that there's a sort of romance with, nothing, but like that was not something that was something like going back to
the Flaneur, if I'm not mistaken.
Liam, I think it's Carlos actually. I think if I remember correctly.
I could see that.
I forget.
I think she can she can have a crush on Carlos. But that was one of these things where like you were talking earlier about like, treating things with tact or like a deft touch. We just didn't. We're like, you know what? We're not going to get into romance in the game because it's just on top of everything else that we're trying to say. It's just too hard. So and I think it actually was like, like so many edits, not having that ended up giving me like a better idea of like, well, what happens if he wants to have a relationship with Lena at the end, but then she's unable to because she either doesn't want to or it's not appropriate. And what is that then? How does he respond to that? So
who wrote the Quantum Hacker, who was my favorite character?
Una was also Robin. So the same person who wrote, so Robin Sloan, he wrote both Aganon and
interesting.
And
it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I could see it.
Those
most sort of abstract randoms. I loved her character.
She
was great.
So good.
I was just like,
so good.
Give me more of her,
she's so incredible, and like the meta-ness of it, and I remember when Vincent dropped the artwork for her, and it was just like so perfect, and like the way that she worked. Laura Sly did all of the 2D animation, and I think she just absolutely nailed it. She just did an incredible job with creating these vocabularies of expression for these 2D sprites that we were trying to puppet.
I was gonna say the same thing, Greg, in terms of that character, like putting a shamanistic character inside a techno-centric world, big
well, of
thumbs
course,
up. Good
Stevenson
job.
says hello, right? Like,
right, yeah, and it also serves a narrative purpose too, of like giving you a little bit of a Deus Ex, right, at the end.
Yeah, she's huge. I also like the fact, by the way, that there was no mockery there. You know, that there's as you say, there's a little bit of the absurdity of it, but there's no mockery of the idea that, you know, she's doing all this stuff and they're just like, oh, there's a bunch of stupid Looney Tunes. There was none of that. You know, there's a sense that it's kind of ineffable and you can't really grab onto it. I guess that's part of what I was thinking with this technology stuff, is that there was a coolness to it, but that can also be translated into some kind of weird neo-religious thing that doesn't quite. But it really wasn't. I mean, you know, it was just fascinating to watch happen, and her attitude towards it, I think, is a big selling point for that. So it's not just, you know.
Yeah, and I think that, like, going back to your earlier question about the technology, I think that part of it is that we're trying to tell a story about how technology is not necessarily, like, the sexiness of technology is part of the problem. Yeah. Right. Like the blind, like the obsession of like, oh, right, like this is cool. Oh, like we'll just solve everything. Like we'll just disrupt it and it'll be fixed.
It's
like,
just disrupt it. Exactly.
You know, like,
just disrupt
it just like
paradigms.
doesn't. Yeah. It just like doesn't just that's not the story that we were trying to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. Russ, you got anything else? And I'm going to get Chat to have a couple questions.
No, I'm happy to have Chat take it. I'm also going to duck out because the children are knocking my door down. So thank you, Andrew. I'll be back in a bit.
Thank you so much.
Okay, sounds good. You just don't cut out of the camera though, right? Just okay, good. Cool. So, all right, Chat. So what we're going to do is I will take questions now from Chat. And the way we'll do this is please just type in question, and then the question that you want, and I will try to get to all of those. There's one that I know Echo said, and I'll just throw this out there. You may not have an answer to this, Andrew, but I'll just ask. This, to me, feels like a slam dunk for GOG's audience, for GOG's audience. I happen to stream over on GOG as well. And I'm just curious if there was any thought about or plans about it, or
in terms of releasing on another platform.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I don't know, because I haven't been involved in like the day-to-day in like 2 years probably. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's fine. I was just curious. So I'm going to, with respect, I'm a big fan of Russ's kids, but okay. So all right. So Chat, if you have other questions, now's the time to get those in. Question : I know that garlic tofu. Here we go. I was about to ask, and then bam. So garlic tofu asks, in case you didn't see it earlier, thank you for the inherent queerness and gender diversity. Yeah, I didn't have a chance to pass that along. You spoke to style guides a little, but I'll ask it in case there's more to say. I'm fascinated that each character was written separately by different writers. That's awesome, and it really showed in the experience. I'm wondering how structured the guidelines, world building were given to the writers, or how much freedom and elasticity were they allowed?
Oh, that's a great question. Style guides were more about, we spent a lot of time talking about tense and what, like, how, like, the way in which we described the world.
Mm-hmm.
The actual world itself was pretty free, and open for each writer. The way that it mostly worked is that we would pitch our ideas of the arcs, and then once we had those sort of outlines of like, okay, here's how this is going to work, here's roughly how the branches might be, then we would fill those in, and then we would go into like a lot more detailed edits in terms of a lot of the style guides were mostly about like how does Lena's talk, what is her voice, like how what are, you know, more like nuts and bolts, like grammar, word tense, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's very cool. And yeah, I take that point, configuration queen. That's interesting about the. I'll have to check that out. The Tech Won't Save Us podcast about sexiness of tech. I do think tech has some value, but it's got to be emotionally grounded.
I have a question to keep us floating.
Yep.
That I just thought of. Is there anything that, and I love asking this question in any medium, what is something that changed as a part of your life, Andrew, as because of being a part of this project? Like, what was something that, because you made NeoCab, is there some sort of lasting effect that you think about? Or, if you had never made this game, what do you feel like it would be different about you? Or, you know what I mean?
Well, I don't know that I necessarily have a satisfying response in terms of like there was an artistic awakening in me from
Sure.
doing it. because like for me these ideas of the sort of corrupting feeling of tech was something that like I have always been, well, not always, but like I've been very, very interested even before working on this. Like briefly, we like some friends and I did a very short-lived web series, like lampooning social media culture. I think though, I mean, but in general, like very like practically, like I am now in the games industry. Like I just started working.
Yeah.
I just started working again this week with Kim Belair, and I'm and her narrative design company. And I am so happy to be back doing it because I think that like writing games, I always wanted to do it. I was always very wary about the exploitation in the industry, and because I have a lot of friends that are in the industry, and it's so brutal in terms of burnout and crunch. We did pretty well with it, but with such a small team, it's hard not to. But now like I'm very, very happy because it feels like to me like the actual personally the work of doing this, I love the medium, and I love the idea that like it's like making a movie but you're also building the camera too.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think that idea about not being exploitative, it's interesting to hear about games that do have that kind of exploitative culture. In fact, even though what they're literally critiquing within the course of the game is this very like countercultural and fight the man and all this, and so there's some interesting kind of qualities to that. I guess what I would ask, if you, because we'll probably take one or two more and then I'll let you go. But if you had the opportunity to soup to nuts, like write a game where it was going to cover stuff that perhaps doesn't get covered in a game like NeoCab, where you would get to really render out whatever your vision is. Do you have that stuff rattling around in your head? Ideas of games that you're like, damn, I really want to do this if I can get the team together, that sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that like that's sort of what I'm thinking about, like in the next, few years, about like what is that project going to be. I think whatever it's going to be is something that's like emotionally grounded, because I feel like that's like there's no real point in doing it. And to be honest, I feel like culturally this is like, to like zoom out, this is one of these things that I'm actually like, one of the few things I'm sort of heartened by is for lack of like a better word, like Gen Z culture, like because I'm like an older millennial, right? Like lower, like Gen X, right?
Yep.
And grew up on media that was very cynical and very hard, right? And like very cool, right? And what I'm excited about in general in movies and games is this embrace of just like weirdness and diversity and genuineness, right? So that's the type of themes that I'm interested in exploring.
That's very cool. Yeah, and you're right 100% about the genuineness. There's a bizarreness about the because I'm also older Gen X though, 72. But there's a bizarreness about the experience. I've talked about this before, growing up in the 80s, about always being on the hair trigger of Armageddon, about always, it was just a manifestly bizarre time, and it's reflected in the culture and that. And so when you play games from that period, tabletop games like Tales from the Loop, I find those profoundly moving because I think they sort of give voice to what we didn't do at the time. Because the other thing Gen X people don't do was talk about it. No one gave a damn, right? It's why it's funny to watch millennials and boomers yell at each other while Gen X are like, well, that's familiar. Welcome to my entire existence. And like, so that, yeah, exactly. So anyway, it's fascinating to me to sort of see that. So you're right. I someone who works, I'm a university professor. I work with that demographic all the time, and I agree with you. I think there's a lot, actually, less cynicism that's been replaced with the sort of, you're right about the weirdness, but also a genuineness that I think is really important. I hope for the best there. I love the Zoomers so much. Yeah, amen to that, Garlic. And the fact that you're right, CQ, that it's more acceptable to be enthusiastic and happy. And that goes back to my question, actually. Maybe this is a good way to finish this up about NeoCab, and then I'll ask you a general thing about future plans. But let's go back to Bulgaris's question, which was this question about a feel-good, is it a feel-good ending? And we all said, it's not exactly a feel-good ending, but there's a grace note, it seems to me, of hope that sustains much of that game. So what I want to ask you is, this is a difficult question, and it's going to rely directly on your own personal opinion. Okay. Do you think that the art that you wish to produce needs to have an element of hope for it to function for you as an expression of art? By which I mean, there are a lot of people who would just argue gray all the time, Game of Thrones, every.
Right.
And I feel that society has moved away from that. I don't think society, grimdark is not on the ascendancy now. And I wonder whether you feel personally that you want your art to express that element of hope or not. And if the answer is no, cool. But I'm just curious.
Right. I think that I think there's a cost, and you have to pay the cost. I think that, like in comedy, if you're going to do a joke, it needs to have a payoff. And I think that oftentimes the everyone dies in the end, or the emotional manipulation, the sort of I love Dancer in the Dark, but it's a very manipulative film, right? It's like the darkness can often be mined for depth, or as a substitute for depth.
Yes.
So I don't necessarily. So initially I would say yes, absolutely. I think there's something that's kind of a little bit beautiful about hope. Although I'm not a particularly hopeful person. I'm a pessimist. So I don't necessarily know that. I think that you need, the art that I create, it needs to have a payoff. And it can't just be dark for the sake of being dark, right? Because I don't think that ultimately that doesn't get you, it's a shock, it's just like you could do something for shock value, and it's fine. Yeah. And those things have place in media, but for me, I think it doesn't necessarily have to have hope, but if it doesn't, it needs to pay off.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. There is a sense of aimlessness that I don't like about deeply cynical work. And I feel like part of that, and just every artist that I've ever respected has at some point taken this on, including those who seem to be more kind of depressing in nature, and yet they reject cynicism utterly. I think a lot about Peter Beagle's Last Unicorn and the Red Bull, which is a creature that literally subsists and exists on the willful ignorance of people who know better, right? Or George Orwell's Animal Farm, where the one he hates the most is Benjamin, because Benjamin the donkey is the intellectual who knew better, but was well, I've been around a long time and the hell with it. Orwell's contempt for that kind of person is palpable to me. So I'm always curious about that. And absolutely the idea is not to create false hope in any way, but I was just curious about, artists that really say, you know what, here is something that, here's a thing that can be taken, that you can either do. It doesn't mean it's inevitable that it's going to happen this way, but you could take the ball and run with it if you wanted, not just, and then flat darkness, which seems pointless, let alone whether it's more believable or not, but it also just seems pointless kind of, by itself.
Right. And but also I think believable is a perfect example where that's an excuse to rationalize the choice that you're making, right?
Yeah.
sorry, I was literally just saying goodnight to my daughter, who just came in, and I didn't want to be like, yes, let me talk more about cynicism and ignore my child, which would be, yeah, exactly, configuration complete, not Pollyanna, oblivious positivity, but like that grace note in NeoCab, grounded enough to feel possible. Yes. Also, and all the way back to Shakespeare, right? The greatest work of Shakespearean tragedy comes out of it because there's even a hope in the sense that you're not going to go down their path. Right. Lear is devastating, but you're not going to be Lear. Because you watched Lear. It's like people misunderstand this about 1984 all the time. They're just like, Big Brother. He wrote that book believing that if you read the book, you wouldn't have Big Brother. And I know we're struggling to avoid it, but every time we bring up Big Brother and I don't immediately get the Twitch stream shut down is a victory for Orwell's point of view, right? It's a context within which we judge other things in our modern existence. So anyway.
I completely agree.
But I didn't want to get on a soapbox. So I was just like, so let me ask you then a question just to sort of finish off here about what's next for you. Obviously you said you're starting to work on this stuff. I know you're an actor. I know you said pre-pandemic, but hey, listen, we're slowly, cautiously, although we have to be careful. Yeah, I know. But the vaccines works against the variants too. We just have to get vaccinated. That's the key. Anyway, but as we're slowly moving towards something, and I'm curious about what your next stage is going to be. I guess this is playing off of Zach's question too, as an now actor, game designer, writer, all of these things. Where are you headed next in terms of what you want to do artistically and otherwise?
Well, day to day, I'm like very excited to be back in the games industry. And then just a plug, on Friday evenings, I'm a player in a 5e horror game.
Ooh. Wow. What is the game? Tell us.
We are immediately intrigued and intrigued.
Yeah, exactly.
It's brutal. It's like it's the exact opposite of the answer that I just gave, which is a little bit because it's brutal. It's like sort of like living through a Dark Souls. It's the idea of the setting is really interesting. It's a horror. It's like a horror sort of Ravenlofty setting.
Okay.
But it's set in the 50s as if it were viewed from an 80s movie.
Oh Jesus! You want to talk about dark? Wow. Good God.
Yeah. So it's like so most of the players die, each episode.
Okay, sounds about right.
Which is hard. It's hard. It's been a little bit challenging because I'm like I want to kind of be heroic, but maybe I should just run all the time. I shouldn't, But it's been fun. I've been really interested in Twitch as a platform for a long time, so it's nice to like.
What channel is it? Let us know what the link is.
The channel is called Long Lost Lore.
Okay.
And it's on Fridays at 7:30 Pacific.
I just put it in there. Is that right there? Twitch.tv/longlostlore. So definitely check. Yeah. That's definitely. And you said it's Fridays when? What time?
Fridays 7:30 Pacific.
7:30 Pacific. Okay, cool. Cool. Very neat. Is it then? I assume it's archived on Twitch or on YouTube or something like that. And then the games industry, and then the current thing you're working on right now. I know you can't talk anything about it, though. If you want to spill everything about you're doing, that's totally fine.
Please do it here.
Please do it right now. No one will know except all the people that watch this. No, but are you able to mention anything about like is it gonna touch some of the same beats that you felt from NeoCab or? And is there any vague, like, we think it'll be maybe a couple of years from now, next year?
No,
like
so the thing, no,
Tuesday.
I'm
Tuesday.
working, no. Yeah. The answer is, no, I'm working on a bunch of different, I'm working on a lot of narrative structure for a bunch of different narrative games.
Oh, cool.
So none, and I literally just started yesterday. So
nice.
So it's still the honeymoon period. I'm absolutely thrilled.
That's great.
It's also like it's really nice to be able to work with people that you've worked with before that are you find very talented. So
that's really awesome. And big and good studios like that. You think about studios like Supergiant Games or I think of Inkle or places like this that just consistently produce good work, and you're just kind of like, and it's an ensemble cast really. It's just like we bring back the same awesome people. So that's really cool. Andrew, I cannot thank you enough for being willing to take out time of your day to do this, and for coming in the first place that allowed us to make this happen.
Well, I'm so appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for making a great game and for being a big part of it, and for a really interesting conversation today. So thank you for being a part of this.
Thanks for a break from Ace Attorney.
That's so true. That was very true. Oh, sorry, Russ. I'll start your video again. Lulu.
Thank you for the opposite of Ace Attorney.
Yeah, this was
Ace Attorney. It has a special place in my heart, right next to NeoCab, and they're very opposite.
Yeah, admittedly, but we've done like Banner Saga and a bunch of these other ones, but this was cool in its own way. So,
cool.
Andrew, thank you very much. We will check that stuff out, and they can find you at twitter.com, and I think it's AMC, if I'm correct. At AMC. Okay.
Yeah.
Andrew, chat, can we get some love there? And Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to let Andrew go, and Russ and Zach stick with me here. Okay. And I have now split Russ's head in half. That's
I was about to say.
That's how I've done that.
That's funny.
So that's all right though. I will address that problem right now. So that was cool. And despite what was just said about and gentlemen, wonderful job as well, not surprisingly. And thank you for being a part of that. Do you have any last thoughts that either of you want to give, and or are you excited about Ace Attorney next week, specifically Apollo Justice?
I am. Yeah, I'm excited. It was cool to meet him and to really talk with. It's not every day you get to talk with someone who made an experience that you had. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And now I really want to talk to Paula now and to the others that made the game as well.
Yeah.
And I know. I'm not sure if that'll ever happen, but yeah, that was really great. I'm glad that he came on. Also hyped that he also plays D&D.
Yeah, exactly.
He made that D&D reference earlier, and I was like, does he play D&D? It's like that thing that happens when someone mentions you're like, do you play D&D?
But look, though,
so
tech, cool. In the same generation, D&D and an actor, I'm like, come on now. Like, at some point. And he said horror campaign, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's like this Curse of Strahd nonsense. Who would ever do anything like that? But it was cool. And chat, you did well also. Plus, Andrew's a pretty sweet name. Yeah, I wonder why you would say that, Rock God. I happen to know the reality of the name. But that was really cool. And this is the kind of thing that I think Twitch can help facilitate, and I hope we do more of. I love doing these interviews, and I'd like to do more of them over time. If we play these games and people find it and they're like, hey, then I love being able to sort of chat more with people who are responsible for producing these amazing games that make us think. And about which was obviously a labor of love in this case. So
now that the ArcLight Theater is defunct, we have the QA with the writer producer as a unique thing. Sorry, that's a very LA reference, but it was like everyone's favorite art theater where you would get writers and directors to come in and take questions after a movie. That whole thing went under, and everyone's like, why LA?
I'm telling you, man,
the best thing about you.
I love this. I love talking shop with people about this. Like, I mean, I love the behind the scenes stuff. And I love it as an experience of both. I enjoy whatever I see as the art, but then getting to talk or playing the art, whatever the case may be, but then getting to experience what they were thinking about is awesome. Like being able to get that stuff. So.
To go, yes, we were geniuses. Also, it may have been a bug on Nintendo Switch.
I was just like, wow. I was like, so I should have just stayed annoyed and not been like, no, actually, really what this is.
That's
oh,
funny.
man. That kind of cracked me up. So good stuff, guys. Unless the two of you are like, I totally want to, play a co-op game right now with all of you.
Let's go. Hey, I'm going to make my pitch. I know it has nothing to do with the theme of anything you ever stream, but we should stream some PUBG. We can do it like bad PUBG team.
I'm just clearly even your own children do not agree with this argument.
They agree with nothing at this stage.
We totally should do that. We should totally play some PUBG. That would be good.
I looked into that game Wildermyth. I got it and I downloaded it. I remember because Dot was talking about it, I think.
Yep.
It would it plays a bit like Banner Saga.
I've played it.
Since
I played Wildermyth. And you're right, it does play like Banner Saga. I think it's really interesting. I don't know if there's enough like
Yeah, that's what I was
vocalizing
gonna
for
say.
the Arvocalists.
Because
You know,
it'll probably end up being a lot of you just playing kind of, which that wasn't a huge problem in Banner Saga, but
no, it was
yeah,
fine.
anyway.
But like, it's something I especially felt after Origami King that I really liked Paper Mario, but I also really felt like I was wasting all of your talents. Like I'm like, I want people talking. You know
Although
what I mean? Like
Dot helping with the puzzles, man, I
that's
think she
true.
had, like,
that's true.
her,
Wildermyth would have a
I
better
keep,
shot at that, but like,
yeah,
you know.
But anyway, but yeah, no, I'm excited. I always like going back to Ace Attorney. It's fun, and I think it's going to be a good comedic
Oh yeah.
break.
I think it's a good thing to go back to for a while. It's one of those things that we play, we leave, we come back to
It's
it.
our
like,
home.
That's yeah. And I think because there's plenty of talking, and I wish that there was another Ace Attorney style game. Mostly because, you know, first of all, Rob to this day still references like, look, you know, the game that you did. But also Ace Attorney is a surprising game to me because there's a serious undercurrent of justice going underneath this ridiculous game about using stock photos of birds but crossed with Ace Attorney, like in France.
Panties.
Like it's utterly ridiculous, but it really does manage it well. And you come away from it with serious questions about stuff. So that would be awesome. Yeah, you'll never forget Zach voicing the radio guy who turned out to be a scientist. No, I talk like this. Oh man, like there were so many good characters in that. Also, I should let everyone know that since this is happening next week, the Arvocalists are going to be with us. That Zach has requested to move away from voicing the judge.
Yeah,
now,
I have.
I mean, now that, you know,
I was like, what did I request?
Without Trent doing the judge and without Zach, it's going to be an interesting experience. So we're gonna see. I mean, like Russ, I
think
imagine
Rob said he was going to take.
Rob
it out,
might do that. You know, if that's the case. Although I don't know if Rob is doing,
I would love to see Russ's judge.
Then
I mean, honestly, if I'm doing it, I'm just doing a Trendane impression, pretty much.
Yeah,
because that's what I remember.
Me for judge? I mean, listen, I could do it, but I do Phoenix. I always play Phoenix, or, you know, Apollo Justice, whatever.
One of us could do Apollo Justice.
Objection. Objection. And then this thing, I don't like Apollo's movements. I feel like Phoenix's movements are more dramatic than sort of the Apollo's kind of like, and it always reminds me of Pain, Russ, you know, doing the like, whatever the hell this thing was.
I forget what he would do.
I don't know, what was the Pain thing, Russ, that Pain did? Was it this thing?
I think he would go like this or something.
Yeah, some kind of gesture
like this, like the best part is when you go back to the first and you see Kate Payne's first case where he loses his hair and it just all disappears at once and he literally yells out, "My hair!" like as it's happening.
I love it.
It's funny because Payne is funny. All right, well, I can.
Okay, Aganon.
The Pain Worm. Listen, Aganon, that guy. All right. Well, I will say goodbye to you, gentlemen, and thank you for being on and doing these questions and really good questions as well. Thank you. And I'm going to see both of you along with hopefully Dot and Rob will be there next week for the return to Apollo Justice. So Russ and Zach.
Justice.
There we go.
Sounds good. Can you say bye-bye? Say bye.
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 Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Alrighty. So, there we go, chat, and I hope you folks enjoyed that as much as I did. I had really a lot of fun with that, and it was good. You know, as I say, I really enjoy things like this. I apologize also early on. I gather my typing was getting picked up by the Samson mic and it was too loud, and I'm sorry because again this is not my usual audio setup, so I apologize. I hope that went away quickly. But I really enjoy these conversations. One, I also like really as a creative myself, I know what goes into it. You know, I know what goes into the process, and so I love being able to kind of get the idea of these of what these people are thinking about and what sort of goes through their head and why. And as far as more arranging this, I used to do a lot more of these, and I still do some. I mean, there's still some that are coming in there. Oh, yeah, I wish you had been here for this Rising Tides. I think you would have enjoyed. I think you would have enjoyed a lot of the answers made. But again, it's the VOD. You'll be able to see it on the VOD. So, all Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah, the Samson mic is a really good mic. It's just that it's not as sensitive to being able to cut out different things in terms of compression. I have a whole mic and compressor set up, but the mixer's blown, so I need a new mixer, which is on the way, and I'll be getting it on Friday. So, but this was really enjoyable for me to do, and I sounds like it was enjoyable for you folks to watch, and so that's great, and we will see more of that. And again, our vocalists are going to be running right back at you next week, next Tuesday, with a very different kind of game, with the Apollo Justice stuff. But we will, I mean, there are some games, including the Patreon fueled games, that sometimes have indie games that I'm able to get people in for. I would love to be able to maybe talk to some of the developers of Solasta, which is the game that I'm playing over on GOG. Neverwinter Nights 2, I don't know, I guess I could talk to the Obsidian folks, try to figure out, I've interviewed Obsidian before, Josh Sawyer and others from there. So I could talk to them a little bit about like, hey, I was going to say interviewing Chris Avallone about Mask of the Betrayer and stuff, but I don't know. Interviewing Chris Avallone's probably not a good idea at the moment. That's right. And I did Masters of the Dungeon, yeah. And I love doing that. Ultimately, though, I may come back to that. A lot of this stuff is kind of, certain things will dip out and certain things will come back in. And so as my overall schedule allows, as certain things drop out and certain things come back in, we had Hearts of Wulin on this channel. That dropped back out. I really liked Hearts of Wulin. I'd love to have that come back. But then we got Brandon's Sound Clash and we got the Speculate projects that are running that I'm really happy with. We obviously have Community D&D and we lost Emberwind. But again, I have other some other irons in the fire where I'm going to be getting some other stuff like that. So there's going to be more content. And yes, tomorrow night you've got Community D&D. I also wanted to mention two things that I didn't have a chance to speak about very long before, because today has been a day, people. But so the first one is I wanted you to see this again for those of you who missed it. So this right here. This is the world of Greyhawk. And this is literally the stuff that I showed you that was from the Gazetteer that I bought back in, I was given back in 1983, 84. And so this right here is, what's Community D&D? I'll talk about that in a minute. But this right here is the entire world. And the reason I'm showing this is because we have one thing which is literally set, and it's right here is where it's set actually, in Saltmarsh, the Ghosts of Saltmarsh. And so I got this done. I've got to put a laminate. The reason it's still in plastic is we have to put a laminate over it, but they did a really good job actually of fixing these two halves together and making it actually fit. So I'm really happy with the job that they did on this. Yeah, I hear you, Echo. I hear you, man. I love this map, and what I would love to do, and I may end up doing, is I might end up even putting it over there, possibly, or maybe over here. I have to think about where I want to put it. I also considered putting it up on the top shelf back there, but the problem is it actually doesn't fit because it's really big. So I don't know. I have a couple of different options, but I'm really happy with it, and I like the idea of it's something that I can occasionally refer to as an enormous map, sort of like Tren has that, right? Tren's got that for Forgotten Realms, but back in the day when I first got started, it was Greyhawk that we played, and I loved this map. I like maps quite a bit anyway, but I loved this map, and it was just so evocative to me. The white fanged bay, snow barbarians, the ice barbarians, I guess they don't get along. The frost barbarians clearly don't get along. Theocracy of the Pale, the Bone Marsh, the Great Kingdom. Over here you've got the Duchy of Ernst, the County of Ernst, you've got the Shield Lands, the Horn Society. I always loved down here the Hold of the Sea Princes, which are basically a bunch of pirates. So I really love this stuff. The Land of Black Ice is up here, so I love it, and I love the style of it too. So it's really cool, and I want to get like a laminate on it, and then be able to put it up. So, but anyway, first of all, this is where that campaign is going to be happening. So I wanted to mention that. The second thing I wanted to mention is that I recently got this. One second. So Cubicle 7, which used to make Adventures in Middle-earth, ended up having to get out of Adventures in Middle-earth. It's been picked up by Free League, and I am trying to set things up so that we can get sponsored by them again, because the Adventures in Middle-earth campaign... Hey, what's up, Moonbook Brandon? Good to see you, man. So Adventures, if that is your real name. It's not, but it's my name on Twitch anyway. Anyway, so good to see you, Brendan. But anyway, so Adventures of Middle-earth, which was done by Cubicle 7, is now done by Free League. And Free League is hopefully going to be able to sponsor us down the line, I hope. Anyway, Cubicle 7 got out of it, and I still am using Cubicle 7's books because, we only go through this at a certain speed, right? Well, so they just announced, they had originally announced that they had re-upped with HomeGuard Press, which is run by Joe Deaver's son. Joe Deaver is the author, of course, of the Lone Wolf series. We did the Lone Wolf game books on here. I actually played the Lone Wolf video game on here as well. I like Lone Wolf quite a bit. So there's a Lone Wolf adventure game that I'm still interested in playing at some point. I have a couple of those games that I want to play. That one, I want to do a Beowulf game at some point. So, but they just announced, after re-upping with HomeGuard in April, they just announced like a week or two ago that they were going to have to, because of unexpected circumstances, they were going to have to stop publishing Lone Wolf, and they were no longer going to have the property. And I don't understand why this keeps happening to Cubicle 7. Like, some of this stuff is obviously outside of their control, but they basically now are down to like Doctor Who and Warhammer. And I don't know, I wonder a little bit sometimes about this, because the same thing happened with Games Workshop. Games Workshop used to be this big, broad company that did Chainsaw Warrior that I have back there. They did Talisman. They did Warlock of Firetop Mountain. They did a whole ton of these games. And they did Warhammer, and then they ended up, and now they just do Warhammer. And like at a certain point, it felt like Warhammer just dominated everything, and so now they're just Warhammer all the time. And I understand, people like Warhammer, but like, okay, like, is there anything else you can do besides Warhammer? And so I worry a little bit that the Cubicle 7 is going the same way. And I don't know if this has anything to do with this, if like something about the licensing means that they have to, they end up sort of being so sucked in to doing stuff like Warhammer that they don't have like funding or time or energy to be able to devote to anything else. I don't know, we'll see. But in any case, so this happened, and then they announced that they were selling off their stuff. So I immediately picked this up because this was all like 50% off. So I got, and this is the thing, see, Cubicle 7 always has this great art type of stuff, right? So we have the narrator's screen. We have the Heroes of Magnamund, the expanded character handbook. And there's very, very cool stuff, it seems to me, within this. There is, let's see, so you can be Echo will appreciate this, a Dwarven Gunner of Boar, okay? So being a Dwarven Gunner, always willing to go on adventures, gives them a chance to practice their shooting skills. They are powerfully built, short of stature, almost always carry at least one weapon, which for Dwarven Gunners is typically a boar musket. Last but certainly not least, they always smell faintly of the forge. The scent of coal, iron, burning embers, and bitter ash cling to every inch of a boar dwarf skin, though other dwarves do not consider this a bad thing at all. You have Dwarven Gunner abilities. You have accuracy, you have fire shot, you can cause a halo of flame to encircle the fired shot. You have gun butting, so gun butting means you never count as being unarmed. You can basically battle people like melee with stuff like this. Oh dude, you know how much I find Tales of the Loop moving. You know that from personal experience. Yeah man, straight up, like I would love to get a free, I'm trying. I would love to get Free League up there as well. If there comes a point where, and there will come a point at some point where we bring some of the stuff we're doing to a close and we're looking for the next thing, I do want to put in a pitch. You were amazing. I've had two amazing GMs, Johnny Pittman, Video Store Cowboy, and Esper Genesis, of course, and Brandon O'Brien right here, who did as GMs for Tales of the Loop. And I found Tales from the Loop to be so moving to me that I was just like, I would love to have a campaign of that hosted on my channel. So I'm just saying. Anyway, but yeah, sharpshooting. So there's a whole bunch of there's just a ton of good stuff that I love on this. I'm not saying you want to be a dwarven shooter, but it's just an interesting different thing, like being an ice barbarian, a Clune Sage of Chaman. For the Clune, adventure means learning and vice versa. Their favorite saying is knowledge is a never-ending feast. When it comes to learning, the Clune have voracious appetites. And so they have stuff like this. You can't see it because the lights are on too bright. I'd have to turn it down. But the idea is there's really cool stuff here. There's the Magnamund Menagerie right there. I love that art too, by the way, which has all the monsters and stuff like that. It has a lot of monsters, but not all of them, because the other one that we've got right here is, you would love to finish the story of that one shot? Oh man, I would love to do that. We'll have to talk about that at some point, Brandon, because maybe for part of another fundraiser or whatever, I would love to do that. That was really, man, I was really, whew. And that was another example of a game that I came out on the other side of it and I didn't feel like it was, in quotes, a fun ride. It was just so powerful that it was meaningful for that reason. So would I every single time want to play nothing but emotional, hit you in the feels without ever having a let up? No. But I also do not want to play games that are just like cotton candy. I like variety. I like games that have a mix. I like games that are more serious, less serious. And having a chance to do something like that is really cool. Oh, completely agree, Garlic. Brandon's an awesome... I mean, listen, everyone knows how much I like Brandon. Brandon's just good people, wonderful poet, wonderful GM, a wonderful game designer, wonderful game developer. You get to see... I'm fortunate to be able to host him on this channel. Okay. But, like, I don't know. Look at this. Stalking Lasher. I got to fix this so I can actually show it. All right. I'm going to turn this down for a moment just so that this doesn't overexpose. Look at that. A stalking Lasher. Tentacled mutants inhabit the... Come on, focus. Inhabit the lower levels of city fortresses of the Darklands, the murky slime pools of the Nagogizaga. A stalking Lasher has a rudimentary giant tick-like body, but is devoid of legs. Instead, it has 4 large tendrils, one of which is a massive bloodshot eye at its tip. The other 3 tendrils resemble barbed whips. Just like, whew. I don't know. I really love that stuff. And I always really liked the Lone Wolf world. And so I basically thought it would be cool to sort of check this out and get these things. And so I ended up picking this stuff up. And the last one is a campaign. Now I got the original box that has 3 adventures in it. And then there's also this campaign. And there's another one, which I'll talk about in a minute. So this is the campaign that I got called Terror of the Dark Lords, which basically is a 5-part campaign in which you uncover this nefarious plan to crush Sommerland, because this whole thing is about Sommerland. And there's another one called Rookhaven, which is kind of like a gothic take on Lone Wolf. So the point is, this is a lot of good material, and I got all of this for like... $100. All of these books. And I think the PDFs I think for $125, I got all these plus 2 PDFs. Because they're not going to be carrying it anymore. So I was like, even if I never play any of it and I just want to, rate it for material, which all DMs do, don't lie, you all do it. I was just like, that's like, it was worth sort of checking it out. And again, these are nice books, nice quality books. So I am very happy about that. And who knows? I hope I'll get a chance to do some Lone Wolf down the line. I would like to. I really, as I say, I like the Lone Wolf world, and it would be fun to play a little bit of that. But my point is, we have other stuff that's in the hopper, on the docket, as it were, to sort of look at, and more of that stuff will be done over time. But that is going to do it for today. We had a fairly long streaming day today, although, again, the tech problems with the audio and everything meant that it wasn't as long as I hoped. I wanted to get more streaming in. I thought I was going to be streaming some Adventures of Middle-earth, but then we had to push that back. Then I thought I was going to be streaming Neverwinter Nights 2. I did get to stream some Neverwinter Nights 2, but the audio setup was all fouled up because, again, what happened to my mixer? I'm getting a new mixer on Friday. It'll all work itself out in the end. But the good news is that we've got some good stuff coming at you down the line. Yeah, very funny, very funny. Well, I'll tell you what, Brandon, today I had like a whole mess of stuff I had to work through because there was this weird sound that was popping up that was not normal, and thank God, I'm pretty sure it was the mixer. It's either the mixer or the compressor. It could be the mic, but it's unlikely. It's definitely not the PC. So I am just oh, nice, CQ. I will check that out. That's cool. Yeah, well, that's also... And Rising Tides, you need to put a link down there. I think I want to say we already have a link for. I know we have a link for your itch page, but I feel like we may have put together a link for the poetry thing. But you should definitely check it out. And you should put a link in there so we can get it. For pre-orders, etc. There it is. I know it's from Interstellar Flight Press. Yes. Can you sign my tentacle? Brandon's a wonderful poet. As I've said, I am always most impressed by poets who surprise me. And my friend Brian Talwara is like that. I think Nancy Hightower produces work that surprises me in her poetry. Brandon is absolutely in that ball. Brandon does the same thing. I mean, Brandon's poetry is just beautifully rendered and very visceral as well. Especially there was a poem that was, I think, nominated, and I don't remember now the name of it, about werewolves from a couple of months ago. And man, that was, I agree, CQ, I agree. And it was really lovely. Just very visceral, very powerful, very genuine, and well rendered. Someone, you feel like you're in the hands of a professional. And I love feeling like that when I'm reading a book. It's the way I've been feeling. Right now I'm reading Martha Wells's Artificial Condition, the sequel to All Systems Red, and it's just as good. Like it's Martha's ability to, it's just, you are in the hands of an expert. And so I always feel that way with Brandon. Yes, let me introduce you, Moonbook Brandon, to the Rising Tides, who is another Brandon. Both Brandons, yes. I'm a big fan of Brandon's. But no, this is, of course, Brandon O'Brien. But I really, really admire the ability to do that. So you should check out Brandon's poetry because he's great. And you should check out Brandon's GMing because he's great. And you should check out Brandon's playing with me next Friday when when he is going to be playing a thief to my, an outlaw, plays the outlaw to my vengeant in Rebel Crown. You will definitely want to check that out with our good friend Mike Underwood as the GM. Mike's also a great GM, of course, and getting a chance to sort of see what that's like. So you will want to make that happen. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know where I was going with that except to say that Brandon was great and you should read his stuff. So yeah, but as far as what we've got coming up now, tomorrow night, oh my goodness, 47 months, Shadowed Mage with the tier 3 sub. Thank you very much, Shadowed Mage. Thank you, dude. I hope everything is going well for you. Tier 3, 47 months. Thank you very much, dude. Wow. 1 month away from 4 years. That is absurd. 1 year away from 4 years. Man, I'm so grateful for that. I really hope I will renew my wish for Twitch to open up affiliate sub badges so that I can give people more. I got more. I got another sub badge just chambered and ready. I got more going on. And yeah, Shadowed has got new overlays he's produced for us and stuff, so it really makes a difference. And oh my God, Rising Tides with a resub for 7 months. Thank you, Rising Tides. Thank you, dude, so much. I appreciate that. 7 months, the resub, and the coveted feather. So thank you very much. Thank you so much, Rising Tides. I appreciate it, man. So yeah, so we've got coming up tomorrow, we've got Community D&D, which is, oh my God, Echo Alpha with the tier 2 resub for 39 months. Dear God, thank you so much, Echo. Of course, Echo's been a sub here and a member here and good standing for a long, long time. Thank you, Echo, so much. I appreciate that, man. And hopefully PC stuff hangs in there. I know it can, believe me, I know directly the pain of the stress, but hang in there. Hopefully it will not end up being that stressful. And I'm so glad, Lone Wolf. I really have a lot of positive people that really, and it's not the sort of toxic, everything's great. It's a genuine positivity that can lead to calls for action, right? When I talk about the community coming together, we do it and we actually help and we actually make a difference. And I am so much a fan when it comes to, from a political point of view, I am so much of a fan of Al Giordano, who I follow and I like quite a bit on Twitter, always talks about the importance of looking for the receipts, as he puts it. So rather than just sort of the activism where everyone just yells at each other and nothing really happens, it's an activism that is both a call to action and then action, and the receipts to prove that the action was done. And I really, really like this community that does that. So that makes a big difference with what we've got here. So... oh, well, I'm so sorry to hear that, Echo. And what I'll say is, hang in here. Yeah, I appreciate that, Brandon. We really do. I would say echo, just the one thing I'll say is my one bit of advice is try to let the moment come as it comes and try not to anticipate what will or won't happen. Hopefully everything's going to be great and you'll have a really fun session tomorrow. If something happens where you're not able to make it or something, you'll either they'll play and they'll bring you in as soon as they can, or you'll reschedule, or it's not like if you don't play tomorrow it's over, obviously I want people to continue to play and I want the campaign, because it's fun to watch, I want the campaign and the momentum to continue, but I don't either want you to feel super stressed like it's either this or that. So just we appreciate whenever you can share your joy of play with us. I said the same thing to the Sound Clash crew. I said the same thing to the Blades in the Dark crew. Actually, I don't think I said it. I said this individually, the Sound Clash people, but I said it as a group to the Blades in the Dark people, in case of the Cindered Seal, that one of the things I love about this community is and this channel is my opportunity to let you share the joy of playing with us. And that is a joy that I think everybody feeds off of. So I want you to view it as a chance for joy. If it doesn't happen tomorrow, it'll happen at some point, and just, no pressure, but if you're able to do it, awesome, and that's the hope. If you are able to do it, then you will be joining, of course, us for Wednesday at 9 p.m. the Eastern, the Shadow Crew, with, of course, the amazing Triffity Mats and the incredible Echo Alpha X5 and the incomparable Rock God and the unbelievable Hoodie and the astonishing Shadowed Mage, their DM, with of course Dragon of Icespire Peak. So you'll definitely want to watch that. That'll be coming tomorrow. Thursday we're off. Friday night, we have got, again, Rebel Crown, and that will be myself, Brandon, Dongwon Song, and Alex Axe playing with Mike Underwood as the GM. Then on Saturday, we've got a TBD, because a good friend of mine, and Russ that you just saw here, very good dear friend of mine, Story, is going to be coming and visiting with his family. So we're going to be doing something. Oh, anonymous user has gifted a tier 1 sub to Moonbook Brandon. The anonymous gifter strikes again. Thank you, anonymous user. Thank you, anonymous gifter, one of my favorite people. Thank you so much, and welcome, Brandon. You are now part of the. You were always part of the community when you arrived, but you are now. You've got your own sub, and hopefully you will see that and like it, and want to stick with it over time. But enjoy the emotes and all that kind of good stuff. Thank you to the anonymous gifter. I really appreciate that. So. So on Saturday it's a TBD, so this is a big time gamer, this guy. So either I could see us playing like a board game that I stream with the entire families, collective families. I could see that. It may be something where we play video games up here, and he and I are just hanging out playing video games. He likes a lot of different cool stuff, like he's a game guy, so we can definitely do that. We could do a live recording of our show, The MEP Report, which is the podcast, long-running, 14, 15-year running podcast that we do, which is comedy related with Russ Story and myself about various matters, political and otherwise. We might do something like that. So I don't know. We might do nothing. It's possible we might not do anything. I don't know. I'm having to play this one by ear. So Saturday is up in the air. Sunday, though, is not up in the air. Sunday, we have got more of Sound Clash the Clampdown coming at you with the Rising Tides and company, which is going to be great. So we've got that going on. Then we have on next Tuesday, we've got Adventures in Middle-earth, although that may end up getting rescheduled. We may not be able to do AIME, in which case, if we don't do that, then we would do instead Neverwinter Nights 2 Complete. And then over on GOG.com, I'll be doing Solasta, Crown of the Magister. And then tonight, a week from tonight, we will be back at 9 p.m. Eastern with the Arvocalists playing some Apollo Justice. So that's what we've got going on over the next week. And then we've got more Esper Genesis. We have more D&D with GOG coming your way with Ghosts of Saltmarsh. That'll be coming 2 weeks from today. We have got we have not yet played any of our D&D with Infinity and Beyond Eberron stuff this month. We've got 2 of those that we're putting back-to-back weekends. We aren't normally going to do that, but we're doing that to accommodate Rob's vacation this time. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to have some cool new overlays for that. I've also got some other surprises you may want to see. I'm very excited about. That may or may not be ready by that Saturday, which is a week from this coming Saturday, I believe. Yeah, it's a week from this coming Saturday. It may be ready for that. If not, it'll be there the week after. But either way, very exciting stuff coming on the horizon. And just keeping on with the stream and everything else. So, but I'm going to rise up on out of here. It has been a long day of streaming, and I'm gonna get rolling and have a little bit of late dinner and do a bit of reading of Martha Wells. That's my plan for tonight. With me, Mike, and Brandon. Oh yeah, I mean, listen, I've independently had Mike on there. I've had Brandon on there. And I feel like, Shadowed, have I ever had you on there? I feel like I might have had you on there. If I haven't, I think I was talking with Shadowed about doing it before we finally decided to close down Masters of the Dungeon. It could come back. It might come back in the future. It's possible. But that is going to do it for me. I hope everyone had a wonderful time. We are going to do a raid today. Okay, so then we were just thinking about the possibility of doing it. So that's I might just try to get all the game masters on at once. So I would just get, me, Shadowed, Mike, Brandon, let me see, me, Shadowed, Mike, Brandon. Who else do I have? Is that all I have right now? Me, Shadowed, Mike, and Brandon? I guess so. In the past, we've also had Wayne for Kat's brother for the Hearts of Wulin. In the past, I've had John as Emberwind. Well, yeah, but John is not a current GM. I'm talking about like current GMs. Yeah, at some point we'll make this happen. Yeah, well, right. And exactly. That's true. Thank you. I don't, that absolutely. And that's very true that we also do a Masters of the Dungeon thing on Speculate. And if you are interested in this stuff and you're like, you want to hear people talk more about games, let me recommend we do not only interviews, but we have Brandon and Mike and myself chatting about Speculate, which we all co-host, chatting about various games and game mastering systems and stuff like that. So that is something which you can jump on board. That Patreon, also we're looking to build those numbers. That Patreon allows you access to behind the scenes stuff. It is not expensive to do that. I think our top tier is like $5 a month, either 5 or 10, but it also makes a big difference for us. So that's separate from my own channel Patreon, but it's got its own Speculate unique stuff. So if you want to jump on board, we would love to see that if you want to hear more of this talking shop type of stuff, which we love doing. But I have got to get going. So I'm going to remind everybody about ways to support us. We already did that, but just as a reminder, please follow the channel. Check out the YouTube at !ArvTube, Discord at !ArvCord, Twitter !ArvTweets, website arvanelaron.com. That's cute, Dragon. And the financial side, !ArvShop, which is the merchandise area. !ArvTrayon is my Patreon, which I just realized is accidentally not there because I was moving that over. So you should definitely check out the Patreon, which is right there. Great. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Lovely. I knew there was something I was missing. I'm like, what is the thing that I'm missing? And now I know what it is. Now I know. And knowing is half the battle. All right. Damn it. Nope. Okay, good. So, yeah, so the Patreon right there, sitting at 23 patrons, $2.14 per month, really does make a difference. It's the financial backbone of the channel. It's what allows me to get light panels, light setups. It's what lets me spend my money to get the mixer replaced and all that kind of stuff. I was thinking that Go Joe. I was just thinking the G.I. Joe thing. So thank you for your support if you already are. If not, please consider jumping on board. You can also get cool stuff for you individually and also stuff for the channel as a whole. I would love to do another Arvanaut Idol contest, which is our writing contest. I'd love to do another Talisman tournament. But to do all of that, we need to get more financial support. So please consider jumping on board there. And as many of you have done tonight, you can sub to the channel, which I'm really grateful for. That also makes a difference as well. You can get those custom sub badges and emotes and stuff like that. And of course, inspirations. Switching mics, if the mic is not the problem. The reason is that my normal mic is an XLR mic. An XLR has to do with the kind of interface, like the way basically the jack that it uses. And XLR mics are professional microphones. That's what you use when you're playing on stage. Excuse me, but an XLR mic doesn't just go into a computer. And so to use that, you have to go into something else. So mine goes into an XLR mixer, and the mixer is what goes into the computer. You're happy to help with any publishing? Oh, well, listen, I I definitely appreciate, as I was talking about, I like having more publishing people on board with this, Brandon. So I can definitely see that as something that down the line we may speak more to publishing people like yourself about stuff, because we ourselves have a lot of experience with publishing, both traditional and otherwise. And so I would, I'm always happy to, have people on board who do stuff like that. Anyway, so yes, the support in the subs and those custom sub badges and emotes and inspirations to help our players, as well as on the Patreon. On the publishing side, Icarus is my Icarus graphic novel from Athos Arts, award-winning graphic novel that is very excited about that. Athos is also doing my Greyshade novel, which is coming out soon, and the follow-ups to that, Renegade and Heretic, along with the rest of the Greyshade IP, the Greyshade board game, the Greyshade tabletop role-playing game, the Greyshade audiobook. All of that is going to be coming out with Clarion Game Studios heading up that Kickstarter, launching on August 31st and ending October 3rd. So we're going to talk more about that as it gets closer. Also, we have got Tales and Tomes from the Forbidden Library, which is exclamation point library. That's my 5e adventure and sourcebook, which was published by Alligator Alley Entertainment, which is doing the tabletop role-playing game for Greyshade. So we're trying to do all that stuff. And yeah, thank you. I have the best mods ever. They are awesome, as I've said many times. So please consider supporting us there. And thank you if you've already done so. And of course, as always, exclamation point BLM, Black Lives Matter. Very important to affirm and assert the significance and importance of Black lives. I will not stop continuing to bring this up. It is extremely important that we continue to remember it and put it forward. And also exclamation point help now, the World Health Organization page on suicide prevention. Very important to reach out to others when you need help and to reach out to others when they need help as well. We are going to do a raid tonight because we have a good, enthusiastic crew. Raid is real simple. If you are a sub, you're going to do this. The Arvanauts have landed, followed by Twitch raid, lowercase Twitch, uppercase R, lowercase AID. If you are not a sub, you're going to do this. Arvany Hype, then you've got the Arvanauts have landed, you've got Twitch Raid, you've got Arvany Roar, you can also throw in Arvany Woe, Arvany Sub, Arvany Witch, Arvany What, Arvany Love, any of the Arvanys you can basically do that you have access to, and that makes a big difference for the channel we're going to, helps us, helps them, fun for you, and all that kind of good stuff. And I think I know who we're going to raid tonight, but let me just double check and make sure. I know who we've got going on. We got a lot of people. All right, let's see. I know who we can raid. It has been a little while since I've raided this person, actually. So good stuff. I know exactly who we're going to raid. So, please make sure to stick around just for the raid, and then afterwards you can head off to wherever you're going to go. Otherwise, please make sure you join me tomorrow right here on this channel, Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern for Community D&D, Dragon of Icespire Peak with the Shadow Crew, and then again on Friday for Rebel Crown, the joint Speculate Twitch event with your friend and mine, Mike Underwood, as the GM, and Brandon and I, joined by Dongwon Song and Alex Axe, trying to put the Splendor back on the throne where they belong. So please make sure you join us for that. That's going to do it for me. I want to thank all the wonderful people who made this an awesome stream. Thank you to Dragon Spear, Rock God, Shadow Mage, Rising Tides, and Trifity Mats, best mods in the business. Thank you to my subs, Dragon Spear, Rock God, Shadow Mage, Rising Tides, Trifity Mats, Echo Elf X5, Configuration Queen, Crit Twitch, Garlic Tofu, Lone Wolf, Moonbook Brandon, and Mrs. Dunsel. Thank you so much again to the anonymous gifter as well who gave subs today, even if it was multiple people. Thank you to those who did that. It really does make a difference. Thank you to my wonderful viewers. Thank you to an anonymous gifter. Thank you to Arcdor. Thank you to Asdayan. Thank you to Dark Sky. Thank you to Freeweed. Thank you to Galadriel Bot, who is totally not a bot run by Dragonspear. Thank you to Gigafrost. Thank you to Nonstop. What's up, Nonstop? Thank you to Omegajet. Thank you to Riso Nari. Thank you to Second OBS. Thank you to Tauntoms, Uncle Elias. Actually, Second Obs. I always pronounce that wrong. Sorry, Second Obs. Thank you to Tauntoms. Thank you to Uncle Elias. Thank you to V&K. Thank you to Wenchkin. And thank you to Xenorex. Thank you in all, and that's it for me. Please make sure you stick around for the raid, and I will see all of you lovely people tomorrow right here for Community D&D. Until then, everyone be good to each other. Oh, and one last thing. Thank you to my Arvocalists today, Russ and Zach, and a special thanks to Andrew McClain for coming on and doing the interview for us. We really appreciate it, and it was really fascinating, and you're always welcome back to talk about new games that you're involved with. Now, goodbye for now. Stick around for the raid. Much love to everyone, and be good to each other. I'll talk to y'all soon. Honk.